Right. I really need to get myself a PUME to do fun pictures for my presentations. Yeah. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the legal framework around privacy. But before we get into that, there are a few basic ideas you need to understand. Okay. So the first idea is that private actors, so all of us, each of one of us, as well as companies, they're what we call private actors because they're not the government. They are allowed to do anything as long as it isn't illegal or regulated by the law in some way. So you have the freedom to do whatever you want unless there is a law dealing with it. The second thing is that one of those freedoms is that private actors can enter into contracts with each other. Now you may think, oh, contract sounds really complicated, but all of you have been involved in contracts. So when you go to the local stationery shop and you buy a pen, that's actually a contract between you and that person, that he will give you that pen in exchange for this amount of money, right? But whereas, some of you may have gone shopping and you may say, okay, if I buy two, will you give me a discount on the second one? Or if I buy two, will you give me the third one free? And you sort of negotiate the privacy agreements that these companies have, you don't get to, right? So the privacy agreements or these, when you click that accept, you're actually entering into a contract. So for example, Facebook or Instagram as one private entity and you as another private entity are entering into this contract. But because they are so big and they deal with so many people, they don't tailor their contracts, right? So it's basically a take it or leave it situation where you either accept the terms and conditions or you just don't use their platform, right? So having said that, I'll just go very quickly. Try to take you through some of the things that Facebook, the way Facebook handles your privacy, right? And this is from Facebook's privacy policy. And I checked the Instagram privacy policy. It's basically more or less the same as Facebook, right? So Malin already told you that it develops a large sort of disaggregated profile of who you are. You remember that picture of the creepy virtual you. And the thing is that creepy virtual you is not like someone that's completely different from you, right? It's you to an extent, but it's not fully you, right? But marketers aren't interested in like the subtle nuances of your personality and like how compassionate you are or whatever. They are interested in finding out like what sites you visit, what kind of products you've expressed interest in. And so they take this information that this 13 to 19-year-old who lives in Colombo and visits dog pictures a lot, and then they send you an advertisement based on that, right? So that's how they actually sell your information. They create this profile and people who advertise through Facebook get to do that. The second thing is that changing your privacy settings doesn't stop what Facebook tracks about you, right? So, or what these platforms track about you. That will only affect what other people see on your platform. So I saw in your questionnaire, some of you said your settings are for friends only, some for friends of friends. Regardless of whether you change that setting, Facebook is still collecting all these things about you. And Instagram is still collecting all these things about you. So that includes, as you see in points 3 and 4, like your spending habits. It collects information from your devices. So for example, I lost my phone recently. And when I went on to Google to check, Google is telling me that I haven't put a screen pattern or a lock on my phone and that I should do that, right? So how does Google know that my phone doesn't have a screen lock? It's because it collects all this information about even the devices you're on, right? And then of course, the last thing is that it shares information across platforms. So very often when you get WhatsApp, you'll give WhatsApp permission to access your contacts, right? Because then those who are on WhatsApp immediately appear, the same contact information appears on WhatsApp. But then WhatsApp shares that information with Instagram. So suddenly when you're on Instagram, it might say, like, let's say you you got the contact of someone recently. It will say, so-and-so who is one of your contacts is on Instagram as this other person or as under this profile. That's how your information is shared across platforms, right? So that's also something to keep in mind. So what have other countries done about it? So in the European Union, there is this law called the General Data Protection Regulation, okay, or the GDPR. And it's a very comprehensive and detailed law that gives all kinds of things. So it gives data subjects. So you and I would be a data subject, like within the meaning of, like if you're a European resident, you would be a data subject. So you have certain rights, like you have rights to request what information has been taken from you. You have a right to actually move your information from one platform to another. You have certain rights. It regulates who can store your data, and then also how your data can be collected, processed, and shared. There are duties and responsibilities assigned to anyone who has your data. So whether it's your employer who has physical files, or Google who has files like digitally, all of them have duties and responsibilities. It applies to anyone handling the data of any European resident. So even if it's like a Chinese company like Alibaba or something, if they are collecting information of European residents, then they are governed by it. And also it specifies penalties for fines, right? Penalties and fines for breaching the regulation. So for example, if there is a data breach, they're supposed to inform you within like 72 hours that a data breach happened. And if they fail to do this, you can actually sue them, right? You can say, look, my rights were violated, and then you can get compensation or something like that. Now, remember what I told you at the beginning, right? I told you at the beginning that unless there is a law regulating it, companies can do whatever they want. So now for European residents, because a law has been passed by the European Union, it applies in those countries, those companies that track or get any kind of information from a European resident have to comply with this law, right? And so there's a huge process where they are consulting lawyers and trying to figure out what they have to do, including what Malin told you about telling people that these cookies are available and that you can tailor, turn off some cookies, leave some cookies on. All of that is because this law was passed, right? So what's the position in Sri Lanka? You may not be surprised. There is no specific law governing data protection in Sri Lanka, but there's a draft law that has been proposed, right? And the law is based on some of these, based on some of the laws that exist out there. But some things that like you should think about, right? About your like breaches of your data privacy is like just getting random texts from businesses and even from the president, right? Like just think about it. Like, did you ever give the president your phone number? No, right? But there have been times when suddenly like on the new year or something like that, you just get this mass message that comes from the president. So that means the telecom companies are basically giving the president all their numbers. I checked my phone recently, like on 14 June, I've got a text message from some fast.lk about like selling products online. And like a while back, I registered on Ikman. So maybe Ikman is just giving my contact number or information to someone else. And I've got a message from Blood Bank, right? So I'm like, who is giving my number around to these people, right? And that tells you that like data protection and your private information online is like very poor in Sri Lanka. And the last thing is very recently, right? There's this Stay Safe Sri Lanka app that you guys may have heard about. Supposedly to help with contact tracing, right? So the government wants to know if you've been somewhere, like we can then tell you that, you know, there was a COVID case there and you should self-isolate. And so it puts up these QR codes outside like No Limit and outside government offices and outside all these other places telling you about like where you just scan it. But there is no law about who gets that information and who is able to use it, right? So just think about it, right? Like presumably someone in the government can say that, okay, if I use that app, that Sanjit this morning went to Keels, then after that he was in the Supreme Court, then after that he went back to like some other government department, then he stopped somewhere else. And it basically creates this specific profile about everywhere you've been, right? So as a result of that, I never use this QR thing, right? Like I always take the trouble to physically sign in just because it will make it that much harder to like figure out where I've been. Not that like the government is interested in me, but that's something that like you need to remember, right? That in Sri Lanka especially, like the law doesn't actually protect you. And so these companies and the people you give your information to can do anything that they want with that information. So think twice before sharing online. So to conclude my thing, because like our legal situation is so poor, and there like a government has no laws regulating information. Nishan is going to tell you about some things that you can do to protect yourself. And so I'll hand it over to Nishan now.